Hello guys, and welcome to our last assignment for the week and for the month. This is going to be our 3D tracking in Nuke. We're going to start with our mountains script and composite that we're going to be doing here, going over the camera tracker and how we can use it, how we can use that data to replicate the camera move. So first thing I'm going to do, I just opened up a blank composite script here in Nuke, and I'm just going to go ahead and read in that mountains I have on my desktop here. Let's see. There are the mountains, okay, and it's just 24 frames long, so we're just going to go ahead and import this in, load this into the viewer. Okay, and you can see that its resolution is 960 by 540, so we're just going to go ahead and go up to Edit, Project Settings, and make sure that we set our full-size format to match 960 by 540. Frame range is only going to be 1 through 24, okay? So let's go ahead and create a camera tracker. Alright, so we're just going to tab in Camera Tracker. Alright, and you can see I accidentally closed down my properties pane. Again, that happens. If that happens, just go back up here, and you just want to bring the properties pane back up. That way when you double click the tracker node, you can see that we have the tracker here. Okay, so let's go over briefly just some of the settings here in the camera tracker. Now this isn't going to be an in-depth tutorial on every single setting that goes over and what they all do. A lot of these we can leave at the default at what they give us, okay? But we will explain a few things here just so you can see, so you can understand what we need to do in order to get this tracked. So I'm going to go ahead and set my play to be a bounce, and we'll just bounce through this here real quick so it plays forward and backward. And just take a look at our shot here. So you can see we have a 3D camera move, pretty much meaning that we have a camera flying through a scene and it's introducing parallax within the shot. So you can see we have our mountain here, and you can see we have the distance mountains in the background, and then of course we've got the sky all in the background here. But let's say I wanted to be able to replicate this camera move in true 3D space, all right? And that's essentially the essence of the camera tracker, being able to track specific features in the frame and replicate this camera move digitally. Okay, so if I, for example, wanted to put something climbing up on top of the mountain, or maybe I want to have some fire or something coming up off the mountain, I would need to have the camera move so I could track it into the scene properly. Okay, so let's just go over a few of the settings here in the camera tracker so we can get this set up here. First thing I'm going to want to do is underneath our mountains, let's just go ahead and hit O on the keyboard and create a roto node. And with this roto node, I'm just going to draw a rectangle that covers this area of our image. Okay. Now if I hit A on the keyboard, you can see in our alpha we've got just an opaque value up here at the top. All right. And we're doing this because we don't want the tracker to track this area. This area is so far off in the distance, it's really not going to give us anything that's usable. And primarily what we're focused on, or what we're trying to track, is going to be here in the foreground. Okay, so we're just going to leave that how it is. So just go ahead and draw that out and then put the camera tracker underneath it. Okay, so let's look at some of the settings here in the camera tracker. You can see, well, first it just says that our import source, it's a sequence, right? This is a sequence of images. You could do just stills if you wanted to. Mask, we're going to say source alpha, right? That's going to be our alpha that we just drew in the alpha channel. Range is just our input, which is just 1 to 24. Again, quick frame range here, but just so we can get the basics layout of how to do this. And then the camera motion. So if you have specific settings about the camera, this is where you would dial all this in here. So this is basically a free camera, meaning that it's moving. You do have other options like rotation, linear motion, or planar motion, but this is free because it's moving forward. Lens distortion, there is not lens distortion on this, but if you didn't know, you could say unknown lens. Focal length, again, we don't know the focal length of this shot, again, so we're just going to leave it at unknown constant. And then film back, this is usually your sensor size and your camera. Again, we don't know anything about this image, so we're just going to leave all this stuff where it is for now. All right. Now let's go over into the settings tab. All right, so we're going to skip user tracks and auto tracks and go right to our settings. Okay, so here are our settings. And what we're going to do is go ahead and preview our features. So I'm going to go down here and turn on preview features and explain kind of what's going on here. There we go. So you can see that Nuke, or the camera tracker, has put out all these little X's all over our shot. Okay, and basically these are a type of trackers. And again, they're called features, but what they're going to do is track these individual areas in the frame. All right, and then how the 3D tracker works is it compares the difference between them. So for example, it's going to track this area of the mountain and how it progresses through, and it's going to track this area of the mountain and how it progresses through the frame range, this area, so on and so forth, all the way through. Okay, and then it compares the difference to reconstruct and to replicate the camera in 3D space. All right, so our number of features, we've started with 150, but we can increase this. We could say 300 if we wanted to, and you can see that, 1 second there. There we go. Now we have much more features in the scene. Okay, and if I go back to 200, right, you can see we can drop it down. Probably about 250 will be good for this. Right, and this just gives us a little bit of breathing room because some of these we are going to delete, we are going to get rid of because we don't want. Detection threshold and feature separation, again, they tend to say if you increase the number of features, you might want to decrease your feature separation. So maybe I'll do something like 7. And that's just going to be how it spreads it out throughout the image. All right, now tracking, here is one of these things where I like to do it in a very particular way. And again, it might be different depending on who you're talking to and the shot. But for this particular shot, basically what the minimum length represents is how long a feature should be on before Nuke considers it a good track or a good feature. So right now it's 3 frames, right? So that means that a feature only needs to be on for 3 frames before Nuke says it's good. Now for me, that's not enough frames. So what I'm actually going to do is say, let's make our minimum length 24 frames. That means the feature needs to stay on the entire time for it to be considered a good feature. Now, keep in mind, this is not something you always do with tracking, and other people will tell you different about what the minimum length needs to be, especially if you're in another program like Synthesize, which we also use here at school. But for this particular shot, and for what we're going to be doing here in a moment, in order to get my best results or my best solve, I want to make sure that my minimum length is the input of our read node. Okay? So track threshold and track smoothness, these you can leave where they're at. Usually they're pretty good, all right? And our track consistency, we can just leave it at 0, okay? So for right now, we've just messed with the number of features, our feature separation, and the minimum length. And that should be good enough to get us going. So let's just go ahead and go to Camera Tracker, all right? And again, if we had these settings, we would plug them in, but we don't. So we're just going to go ahead and hit track and watch it track through. It'll go forward and then backward. Okay, so it's track the features, right? And you can see that when you track the features, you're seeing the length of each feature. So this is 24, this is 24, this is 24, which is exactly what we want for this, okay? Now, up until this point, there's not really much you can do. You can delete a feature if you wanted. So if you didn't want this feature, you could right-click on it and go to Delete Selected and delete features that you didn't want. But at this point, what we need to do is actually solve for the camera move, okay? So after you track and you've tracked through it, you just need to solve. So we're going to solve, and it's going to give us error rate based on pixels, okay? So you can see my error rate is real low. It's below a pixel, 0.38, so I know we're good. And we typically want to keep our error rates below a pixel or even half a pixel, under 0.5, okay? So we're at 0.38, that's really good, all right? That should work for us. And you can see we have one red one here. This is considered a rejected track, meaning that it went beyond a threshold that we had set in our auto tracks here, okay? So what we can do is just go to your auto tracks tab, and any ones that are red, you guys might have more or less than me. Just go ahead and hit delete rejected, and it will delete any of the red ones, okay? If you had any orange ones, by the way, that would be considered an unsolved, so you would delete the unsolved if they were orange. But now if I hit tab on the keyboard, so we'll just go to our viewer and hit tab, you can see that we're starting to get basically a representation of how our features are laid out. So you can kind of see that we have the mountain here in the foreground, all right? You can see kind of the mountains here and the sky in the background, right? So looking pretty cool, okay? So from this point, what we can do is just go ahead and solve or export our camera. So we're going to export a few different things here. I'm not only going to export the camera, but I'm also going to export an entire scene. So if we just click and hold, right, you can see we got essentially what's called a scene plus, right? And when you create this, watch what it makes for you. So we'll hit create. Okay, so it's given us lens distortion. Of course, there was no lens distortion, so this node is probably not doing anything. You can see it gets plugged up into the background input of our scan line. All right. You can see we've got our point cloud data, which if I look at that, that's basically just our features represented like, in a point cloud format. There you go. And it gives us, more importantly, the camera. So if I play through the camera, you can see we've got that camera move. Let me load it in the viewer there. There you go. Well, okay, there. There. Doesn't want to update when you play, but if you scrub through it, you can see there's our camera move. So if I look at this through the scan line, and let's just go up here and look through the camera, right? You can play through it, and you can kind of get a sense of the scene there where all of our features are on the mountain, okay? So great, that's our 3D track, okay? So again, now I know exactly where I would want to place stuff in 3D space, right? I have that camera move, and not only that, I have this point cloud that kind of represents in 3D space where the mountain is, where it's located. Okay, so let's take this a step further. All right, so the next thing we want to do is let's actually use our camera track and what we've done here to actually generate a mesh of this mountain, which we can do based off of these features. And this is a version of what they call photogrammetry, right, where you're using photos to generate mesh. All right, so what we're going to need to do from this point, go ahead and we'll go ahead and backdrop this, so just marquee select to have a backdrop node in. And backdrops tend to come in a little bright. So if you want to change that color, maybe so it's not so bright and saturated. And I'm just going to give this a name. I'm going to call this 3D track. There we go. And like I said, let's just kind of move this down here because the next thing we're going to do is generate our point cloud. Okay, so, let's just do point cloud generator. There we go. All right, so point cloud generator. And you're going to notice the point cloud generator needs a few different things. Okay, so it's going to need our camera. Right, I'm going to plug in just like that. And it's going to need its source input just like that. And if we needed a mask, well, we could use this mask, but I think it'll be fine without the mask. Let's just go ahead and load this in so we can start to generate our mesh here. Okay. So again, with the point cloud generator, a lot of these settings we're not going to go through. We're not going to necessarily need to go through, but we are going to do a few things here. First, we want to do is we want to analyze the sequence based off of keyframes that we set. So basically, it's going to look every 5 frames and kind of determine the motion of the camera, how to rebuild the scene. Okay, so in this case, it has a frame spacing of 15. That's probably too much. So let's drop that down to, let's say, I don't know, 5. All right, and then we'll go ahead and say add all. And you'll notice that it puts keyframes on every 5 frames. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the point cloud where we're at now. Of course, we could adjust with our point separation, our point size. Again, we'll get to that if we need to, but for right now I think we're good with the point cloud generator. So let's just go ahead and track our points. Now, depending on your computer and how long your sequence is, this may take some time, and how many frame or keyframes you have. It shouldn't take too long for us. It's only 24 frames, but this might take a minute or two just to calculate. Okay, so not too bad, and you can see what we have here just kind of represented in 3D space. We've got basically a very dense point cloud representation of our scene here. Okay, so if I were to, let's say, look through the camera again and play through this, you can see basically what we're getting. So what I want to do now is I want to basically create geometry from our mountain. So this is an interesting way of how you can create geometry very quickly without actually modeling anything. All right, so what we're going to do first is we need to make sure that we're selecting the right points and the right ways we select. Now first, you notice all these that are red, these are rejected points. So you want to delete your rejected points, get rid of those. Okay, and then I'm actually going to go from staying in my camera, but what we're going to do is actually turn on vertex selection, so we can select verts. And then we're in 3D, but let's look at the right side. So we can kind of see the layout, right? And really the area that I want is going to be the mountain, which is right there. Okay, so I'm going to marquee select it and group it, but the first thing I want to do is to go up here where we selected our verts and turn off disabled occlusion testing. Okay, this allows me to select all of the verts at once. So I'm going to grab these here. All right, and then we can go back into 3D. Just make sure I got the ones that I wanted. Yep, I think that looks pretty good. And with them selected, we're going to go into the Groups tab of the PointCloud generator and create group. Okay, so if you highlight it, go ahead and call this mountain. Okay, and now all we need to do is export this group as a mesh. So we're going to bake selected groups to mesh. All right, and there's our mesh of our group that we just created. So if I close all this out here, let's see if we can get it back. So you guys can see what the mesh looks like. Go back to node selection. There's our mesh. And of course, we can't see it. If we turn our headlamp on, though, now you can start to see the detail that we've just created. Again, no modeling has been involved. This has all been based off of the features that we tracked in the scene to kind of reconstruct this. Okay, so looking pretty good, right? One thing before we keep going, let me just go ahead and do this because I haven't, is save our script, right? Even sometimes, see, we just get going, we forget to save our scripts. So I'm just going to go up to File, Save Comp As, and I'm going to save this just on my desktop with the naming convention that we have on FSO. So it'll be last name, first name. I can spell my first name. This is Project 09, or Project 9. CFM-C. Now if you're online, it's a CFM-O. Our month, and what this is. So this is mountain. Okay, go ahead and hit save. Pretty cool, huh? So now we've got this mesh here. So let's talk about how we can set up a projection system of our texture onto this mesh. And then we could use this mountain in whatever, scene we wanted to, right? We could put this in something in the background or use it in, or even export it into Maya if we wanted to. So, okay. So let's go ahead and set up our projection, right? And we want to project from, I would say, the first frame here. So I'm just going to go ahead and take our mountains. We'll put our mesh over here to the right, and we're going to clone the mountains, so Option K. Okay, and then we're going to, just like we did in our previous assignment in the Nuke 3D, we're going to create a projection system. So go ahead and create a Project 3D. Okay. And plug this into the image. All right, and then this goes here, just like that. And then the camera we're actually going to copy from over here. So Command C, Command V, create a copy of the camera, and go ahead and plug that in here. Now, the thing about this is, since we're just doing a projection of a texture, we want to make sure that this is holding on a frame. So we don't want the camera moving, and we don't want our sequence moving. So underneath our sequence, we're going to create a frame hold. Okay. And I'm going to copy this and put it underneath the camera too. That way the camera stays in one place, it stays on the first frame, and so does our sequence. And then it projects onto the geometry. All right. So let's see how it's looking here. If I look at my geometry, I should be getting my texture onto it. Very good. All right. Awesome. So let's go ahead and set up our scene and get it set up to render out here. Okay. So what we would do from this point is take our baked mesh. Let's create a scene node. All right, we're going to copy our camera from our 3D track again, so Command C, Command V. And we're going to finally create a scanline renderer. Okay, so now if I look through the scanline, load it in the viewer, and hit Tab on my keyboard, what we're seeing is the camera move, but this is actually just our projection. Now you notice it might look a little off, right? And one of the things we might be able to do is actually create an alpha for uh, the mountain, so it doesn't expose this background here. Okay, so that would be going up here to the top. All right, after our frame hold, let's just create a roto node, and I'm going to load this into the viewer. I'm just going to go ahead and create a Bezier. Just go ahead and draw out a shape that's just our mountain area here. Again, I'm not worried about points or anything because this shape is not necessarily going to get animated, so it's okay to put all these points in the shape. Come down a little bit, come up. Now you notice it's kind of hard to see, so just scrub through. Oh, well, there we go, kind of scrub. Okay, so I'm going to say my edge is right about there. Come back. Sometimes these edges are kind of hard to see, so it's all part of roto, right? Is trying to find the edge that you need to grab. All right. For the sake of what we're doing here, I think this should be okay. I'm going to bring this around. Okay. Come down, come back up, come around. There we go. So now if I hit A on the keyboard, well, let's look at it after. A on the keyboard, there is the alpha. You can see what the frame hold's doing. It's just holding on that frame. So if I play through this, again, nothing's going to happen. It's just stuck on that frame. So in order to see our transparency, what we need to do is take our roto, and we could pre-molt in the roto, or we could just create a pre-molt after. And oh, I did a pre-comp. Sorry, pre-molt. There we go. Go ahead and plug that in there. So now we got our transparency. That goes there. Okay, good. So now if we can look at our projection, we might be getting something that looks a little better. Close this off. And close all those down. Yep. Okay, looks much better on the mountain there. Okay, so one thing you'd want to do if you're seeing any aliasing is go ahead and set it to high here. Filtering, we'll leave it cubic. Let's see if that cleans up any weird type of edge flickers. Yep. There might be a little there on the right, but not too bad. Okay, so this is basically all I want you to do for the mountain. Again, it's not like we're completing something that's finished. This is just to teach you guys a technique of how you guys could use camera tracking to, in this case, not only get the camera move in 3D space, but also use it to generate geometry of some environment. And if you guys are curious about this technique, there's all types of stuff online that goes far beyond what I'm showing you here, and it's photogrammetry. Okay, so look up photogrammetry and research all about this here. And there's all types of videos of how you can generate meshes based off of images or pictures. Okay, so again, let's go ahead and render this out so you can have it for submission. So we'll do a right node underneath. We're going to call this, go ahead and do me a favor, backdrop this, and we'll call this projection. And then you can just go ahead and write out. So we'll say this will be the same naming convention as our script. So you can find your script and just rename it .mov. Save. Okay, so we want to make sure that we use the H.264 codec. Go to the Advanced tab, Codec Options. Go ahead and keyframe and limit data rate, make sure they're unchecked, and your quality slider set to best, and hit OK. Okay, so we'll go ahead and render frames 1 to 24. All right, good. So let's check it, see how we look. We can go up here. All right, there we go. All right, and there is our movie. It looks like we're getting some issues here. Probably on my roto here, I'd want to adjust that area there. But all in all, this is all I need for you guys to render for the mountain, right? And like I said, not producing a finished comp. It's more to teach you guys a technique of how you can use the tracking to get the camera movement and do your projection. All right. So we'll go ahead and end this podcast, and we'll start on the next one, which is our hotel sign.